Hi, I'm Andy Jones, Content Editor for Plaid's online education program, Let's Paint. In today's Skill Builder, we're taking a deep dive into yellow. Yellow is one of the three primary colors, the other two being blue and red. Yellow is the lightest of the primary colors, and it's also one of the most intense colors on the color wheel. And when I say intense color, I mean that it is one of the most bright or vivid colors. So intensity refers to how bright or how dull any given color is. And today we're going to work on changing the intensity of our yellow. So I have a nice little chart here that's been prepared for you, and you can download this chart. If you look in the comment section below the video, there will be a link to where you can download the intensity color chart. So if you want to do that, then as you work along with me and we mix our colors, you'll have a great place to put them. So we are going to concentrate on three primary color terms today: tint, tone, and shade. And we are lowering our intensity by using different methods. Sometimes we're going to lower the intensity, we're going to make the color dull, and we're also going to change the value. And value refers to how light or how dark any given color is. So on my palette, I have a nice medium yellow color, and you can use any yellow that you want to. You could use medium yellow, yellow light, any yellow will work. And I'm going to begin by putting out some titanium white. And we are going to change the intensity of our yellow by the addition of white. So I'm going to pick up some white on my palette knife and move it to a clean spot on the palette. And you will notice that every time I pick up or move paint, I'm going to wipe my palette knife on a paper towel so that I don't put one color into another puddle of paint. You want to keep your paint very clean while you're working with it. So I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to my white. I always want to add the darker color to the lighter color. So you can see instantly that I have a different color yellow. There are some things that I want you to notice about this yellow color. When you compare it, and we'll just do a quick little comparison here. So I'll pick up some yellow on my palette knife. And when you compare it to the original yellow straight from the bottle, you can see two things about this. First thing that you notice is that it's lighter in value. So we've raised the value of the yellow. The second, this light yellow is not nearly as bright or intense as the original yellow color. So we've lowered the chroma or the intensity of the yellow. So the addition of white has done two things: raised the value and lowered the intensity. Anytime that you add white to a color, you are creating what is called a tint. So again, a tint is any color that has been altered with the addition of white. So I'm going to wipe my palette knife off, and I'm going to create a couple of values of yellow for you. I want to basically take a very small amount of white, and I'm going to add a bigger dab of yellow to this, because I just want to create a color that's slightly lighter and slightly less intense than the yellow that I started with. So let's do a quick comparison. You can't judge color from any sort of a distance. So your color needs to be adjacent to the color that you're comparing it to. And while this is a little bit lighter and just a little bit less intense, it's still pretty close to the original yellow. So I'm going to lighten it just a little bit more. I'm going to wipe my palette knife again, and I'm going to pick up just a little bit more white, and I'm going to add that in. As we're only going to make 5 different values of yellow. You could make 100 different values if you wanted to take this color mixing lesson that far. But you can see now that I do have a different value and I also have a different intensity. So we're going to leave that alone. Then what I'd like to do is just split the difference in these two yellows. So I'm going to take some of this yellow, move it, and I'm going to add some of this yellow to it, about equal amounts, and we'll mix those together. As I want to create a yellow that is in between these two. So it's lighter than this one and darker than that one. So now I have 3 different values of yellow. I actually have 4 on my palette. So I have my original yellow, 1 shade lighter, 2 shades lighter, 3 shades lighter, and I'm going to move part of this aside, and I'm going to add an equal amount of white to that. And these mixtures are not, or the amounts of these mixtures is not perfect. So if your measurements are a little bit off, you can adjust it either by adding some more yellow or some more white to this. I think I need a little bit more white there. So I'll just clean my palette knife off and add some additional white to this. And I want to check the color to make sure that it's lighter in value and less intense than the other color here. And I think we're okay with that. And we're going to do this one more time. But I'm going to add a little bit more white to my palette. And I'm going to make a very, very light tint. And I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to this white right here. And you can see I've got a very, very, very light tint. And it is obviously lighter in value and much less intense than the original yellow. So I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to come onto my initial, onto my worksheet here. I'm going to pick up my first color, the pure, unadulterated yellow, and I'm going to add it here in this box so that I know that that is the yellow that I used to create my entire chart. So wipe my brush off, then I'll pick up the first tint that I made, and at the top row I'm going to paint the first tint in the first box. Wipe my brush off, add the second tint to the second box, add the third tint to the third box. So you can see that I've created a value scale here showing different gradations of yellow. And my final one, I'm just going to use my dirty brush and a little bit of white so that it is almost pure white with just the slightest hint of yellow to it. So there you can see the original color, and then we have 5 different values of yellow. Each one is lighter than the previous yellow, and it's also lower in intensity. So these are tints. Any color that you've augmented by the addition of white is called a tint. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on to create some tones. And a tone is going to be any color that we've added gray to. So if you are familiar with the phrase, you need to tone that color down, one way to tone down the color is simply to add gray. Another way to think of a tone is a color that is grayed down. So we have to think of what's going to happen when we mix yellow and gray, because gray is basically a mixture of black and white. So we're in essence going to be adding black to our yellow. And a couple of different things are going to happen, and it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to start with my base yellow, my initial color. And I'm going to add a little bit of gray to the yellow. And you will see what happens. Two things are happening. We are lowering the intensity, so my yellow is not as bright as my original yellow color is. It's also a little darker in value, which is fine, and it's also changing the color a little bit. It's also becoming a little bit of a green color, which is fine because that's what happens when you mix black and yellow. You get a different shade of green. So this will be our first toned down version of yellow with the addition of gray. So I'm going to move part of this aside, and I'm going to add more gray to this mixture. And it's pretty simple to understand what we're doing. I'm adding gray to the yellow, and it is lowering the intensity, it's lowering the value, and in this case, it's actually changing the color a little bit. So there will be times when you want to actually make a shade of green that's like this, and so now you know that simply by adding some gray to yellow, you can get this sort of green color. So let's add a little bit more gray to our mixture here. And it does help if you have a nice mixing knife, a nice metal blade flexible knife to mix your colors with. You can make quick work of this. I do want to caution you to pay attention to the values that you're getting so that you're not jumping too far ahead. But you can see this is darker in value, it's a duller color, and again, it's quite different from the initial yellow that we started with. So we'll move on, move part of that aside, and we will again add another measure of gray to this mixture. Okay, just continuing to mix a little more gray into my yellow mixture there so that you can see I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 values of my yellow that has been toned with the addition of gray. And I'm going to add a little bit more gray to this. And what I want you to notice is that at this point, my color is much more gray than yellow or green. And that's exactly what we're after because we have a value scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values, each value stepping down a bit and lower intensity, darker in color. So I'm going to wipe out my brush very well. I'm going to pick up my first yellow mixture and I'm going to paint it on my worksheet where it says add gray. So this is my first toned down color with the addition of gray. Wipe my paintbrush, add my second value of yellow toned with gray. I think these exercises are important for anyone who wants to have a very good understanding of the paints that they're using and the colors that they use most often. It certainly is not going to hurt you to do this exercise, but don't just do the exercise to be doing it with the intention of learning about the paints that you're using. become familiar with the correct art vocabulary, knowing that you're creating tints, tones, and shades of color, and what value and intensity mean. So that when you are actually painting a design, you can look at something and say, that's too intense for that area of the painting. It's away from its center of interest and it should be less intense. So how do I need to alter that? Do I need to add a gray color to that? Does it need to be lighter in value? Should I add white to that? And you will know that by having mixed these colors to know what your paints will do. All right, so we're halfway through with this. So just to do a little bit of a recap here, we have our base color, which is medium yellow, and then we created 5 values of tints by adding white in increments to our yellow. Now we've created a value scale of tones by adding gray to our yellow, and now we're going to add black to our yellow and create shades of yellow. And a shade is any color that has been altered by the addition of black. So I'm going to put out some pure black onto my palette. And I am working with the original formula of folk art acrylics. But you can do this with any kind of paint if you want to use folk art multi-surface, the original formula of folk art. It doesn't matter. Just pick a nice true yellow to start with and then a nice pure black. So I'm going to move some yellow down here so that this will be easier for you to follow along. And a shade is any color that is altered with the addition of black. So I'm going to add a very small amount of black because black is a much, much stronger color. It has much more tinting strength than yellow does. So a very small amount of black, and add that to the yellow and mix it thoroughly. And again, it's going to do a couple of things right away. The first thing that it's going to do is it's going to change the intensity of the yellow. When you compare it to our original yellow, it is nowhere near as intense. It's also slightly darker because we've added black to it, and the black is also altering the color and making it a little bit green. So I'm going to move a portion of this aside, and we're going to create another value of yellow using, again, the pure black. So add just a small amount, and it's not going to take much black to really alter the yellow. So again, you can see it's darker than the first value that we made. It's also much darker than our original yellow. It's also duller in color and darker in value. So lots of things happening with our yellow paint. So I'm going to move a portion of this aside. And as you might guess, we're going to add another small amount of black to this color. And it's going to lower the value. It's going to make it darker. It's going to lower the intensity, make it less bright. And again, you can check it next to your other yellows and the original yellow and see that it is darker and duller. And then, again, always wiping the palette knife so that it's clean. And when I go back into my black, I don't put green paint into the black. So a little bit of black added to this. And you can see, again, we're making it darker and duller with each addition of black. Or you could say that we're making it a shade darker, because anytime that you add black to a color, you are making a shade of that color. So that's a nice dark green color there. And I'm going to pull just a little bit of that aside. We don't need big puddles of paint because we're just painting swatches onto our worksheet. And I'm once again just adding a small amount of black to this puddle. And you can see that we have an incredibly dark, rich green color. It is darker in value and duller than all of these greens that we've made so far, and such a difference from the original yellow that we started with. So you now know that while traditionally yellow and blue make green, now you know that you can make a beautiful range of greens with the addition of black to your yellow. So let's come back to our worksheet here. And let me just slide this under my palette. And we will paint in our squares on our worksheet. And this is along the black row. So the first addition of black, which is our first shade darker than our yellow. We'll wipe the paintbrush, apply our next green color, or it's actually our next yellow color. And you can see we're just getting progressively darker and progressively duller. Always wipe your brush, moving from one color to the next so that you keep everything neat and clean. And this last square is very, very dark. It could almost be black, but it's not. It's a very dark, dull green color. Okay, so we're 3/4 of the way finished with our exploration of the intensities of yellow, and I want to just briefly mention to you, we've made two different, we've made a tint, a tone, and a shade. There is another way that you can tone down a color, and we've done that by adding gray. You could also add an earth color to this. You could add a burnt umber, a burnt sienna, a raw sienna, a yellow ochre. Any of those kind of earth colors will also tone down or lower the intensity of any given color. One of the most interesting aspects of color is to add its complement to it. So yellow, if you locate yellow on a traditional color wheel, the color directly opposite yellow is violet. And so I'm putting out dioxazine purple, which is a very, very dark, very, very intense purple color. It just looks like black on the palette, but if you rub this color out and make it transparent, you can see that it's a beautiful, beautiful purple color. And so I'm going to put some more yellow out on my palette so that I have it close at hand to work with. So this is again our original medium yellow that we started with, and we're going to lower the intensity by adding its complementary color, and that complementary color is purple. So I'm going to add a small amount of purple to my yellow, and it happens every time. This is scientific stuff, folks. When you add the complement to a color, you are immediately going to alter the intensity of the original color. So if we look at our original yellow, you can see that our color is lower in intensity, it's duller, and it's slightly darker. I can leave that alone, but I think it probably needs just a little bit more purple in there so that we can drive this point home. So just a little bit more purple in there, and we get a great golden color. So if you were painting a fall landscape or some sort of fruit that had yellows in it and you wanted to shade that, you could mix a color from yellow and purple to shade if that worked within your color scheme. So I'm going to move a portion of this yellow off to the side, and we are going to add even more dioxazine purple to this. And again, mixing it thoroughly with a nice flexible blade metal palette knife. And you can see that this color looks suspiciously like yellow ochre. Again, this is a mixture of medium yellow and dioxazine purple, and we get another great darker, duller golden color. So I'm going to push some of that to the side. I'm going to wipe my palette knife off, and I'm going to add, again, more purple to this mix. And notice as I'm working on my palette, I am working in a line of colors so that I can pay attention to what each value looks like. So work neatly and carefully on your palette as you do this exercise. And notice that the addition of more purple here has a color that's looking more like raw sienna. It's darker than the previous color, much darker and much duller than the original yellow. So this is a great toned down version of yellow. The addition of the purple, its complement, really does some exciting things. And as you mix different colors, you'll find some of these exercises you get really astounding results, and some things are a little more subtle and not quite as interesting. So I'm going to add still more purple to this. And the addition of more purple here, the color's much less exciting and kind of just not as beautiful, but it's still an important color, and we have a nice gradation of values. We're lowering the intensity. It's becoming darker and duller with each addition of purple. So I'm going to move this, or move a portion of this aside, wipe my palette knife, and I'm going to add, oh, that didn't clean that off well, so wipe it off again, and I'm going to add still more purple. And now we have a very dark, dull color. And this again, just the addition of more purple to our yellow, and you can see that we get a very interesting gradation of colors. Each one more toned down than the color beforehand. So I'm going to pick up my brush, and I'm going to paint these colors onto our worksheet. Starting with our first add mixture there. That's a little bit messy, so I'm going to shift to a clean brush to do this. And just paint right over that. That's much better. Wipe the brush off. Add my next darker, duller yellow color. Again, wipe the brush. Pick up my next value. Paint that onto the worksheet. If I were you and I were doing this, I would make sure to save my worksheets in some sort of binder so that you have them at the ready anytime you want to look at something and maybe make a color that you've created here on the color chart that you need for a painting. Or if you just want to kind of look around at your colors and go, oh, I should probably add a little bit of gray to my yellow to get the color I need for my painting. It's a very, very good reference. It's a very, very good lesson for you to master. So here we have an intensity worksheet on the color yellow. I'm going to move my palette off camera. And I just want to show you, I've done a chart previously and a chart that I did today, and you can see that the colors are all a little bit different. So every time that you mix a color chart, it's going to be a little bit different because you're going to add different amounts of paint each time you mix them together. So to recap some of our terms that we discussed today, A tint is any color that has the addition of white. A tone is any color that has the addition of gray, and a shade is any color that has the addition of black to it. You can also tone down a color by adding its complement, or the color that lies opposite, on the color wheel. So I hope that you will do this color exercise and enjoy mixing colors and learning as much about color as you can. Thanks for joining me.